Hello, I'm holding in my hand an artillery shell. This is called trench art. It was made from an artillery shell. The shell has a date of 1915 at the bottom, meaning that this shell was used during the Great War, the war to end all wars we call World War I. Because of the poem Flanders Field, I've chosen to put some red poppies in my trench art to commemorate this conflict. Yeah, the Great War. World War I was the most horrific war up to that date in human history. Millions of people died in trenches. They would dig these trenches for protection from machine guns and poisonous gas and artillery, and then sit and basically wait to be buried alive by artillery fire. When the call came to go over the wall, people would climb up and march into walls of machine gun fire, and it would just cut them down like weeds. It was a hell on earth. But what caused it? And that's what I want to look at in this short video, is what actually caused that conflict. And when you look at some of these main causes, a couple of things that come up. Militarism. Militarism is this belief that war somehow makes nations better. That to prove your manliness, to prove your strength as a nation, or your bravery, your valor as an individual, then you went off and you fought war, and it makes a man out of you to go and be involved in combat. And the great powers of Europe, England, France, a new country called Germany, all really, really embrace this ideal of militarism is this proof of almost on a religious fervor. They worshiped war as evidence of superiority, evidence of it was almost a cult-like devotion to the cult of war being how you prove your worthiness, that you'd never get a good spouse unless you could prove that you were, that you showed valor in combat. Yeah, and in fact, if you're going to say anything, I think the glorification of war is probably the biggest cause of the World War I. This because it really did push these other things. They could have been possibly. I mean, they're going to contribute to it, but those things could be mitigated. Another one of the main causes is a really convoluted alliance system. This alliance system was basically, this idea was that you couldn't just have a battle between two great powers. You had, for example, Austria-Hungary was allied with Germany, and Italy is going to be allied with Germany at first, and France is allied with Russia. Russia is allied with Serbia and receiving aid. England is a guarantor of Belgium independence, and all these countries. So what's going to happen is, if you mess with one country, you end up dragging all these other nations into the battle. And so what's going to happen is, in the summer of 1914, there's going to be an assassination. There's a terrorist group called the Black Hand, and they are going to assassinate a man by the name of Archduke Ferdinand. It's not like Archduke Ferdinand was particularly popular, except that he was in the line to the throne of the Empire of Austria and Hungary. And so it was taken as a personal affront. Austria-Hungary was, they looked at it as being almost an insult on their national honor, the insult on their sovereignty. And so they demanded Serbia is in the country of Serbia, excuse me, Serbia issue an apology. And long story short, if Serbia had surrendered to all those demands, they would have basically been giving up their national sovereignty. Well, Serbia is allied to Russia, and the Russian Empire kind of has this attitude. They look at what's called pan-Slavism, that they think they're like the big brother and the defender of all the Slavic people, including Serbians. All right, and Austria-Hungary knows this, and so instead of just picking a fight with Serbia, knowing that Russia's going to be involved, they contact their own big brother, Germany. And Germany is going to come in, and they're going to say, yes, no matter what you do, we will back you up. And so now you have Germany, that's very strong military power, Russia, that's very strong military power, backing up these two other not as strong people. Well, Russia is also allied to France. And so Germany comes up with this thing called the Schlieffen Plan that says because if we go to war with Russia, and we will if we go to war with Serbia, and it looks like we're going to because our buddies are going to go to war with Serbia, which means we're going to go to war with Serbia, which means we go to war with Russia, which means we will also go to war with France. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to attack France first. And so they attack France before they attack Russia, even though Russia was already moving troops into position. Well, in order to get there, the idea is to knock down France before France can recover, and then they can focus on fighting a one-front war in Russia. But in order to do that, they have to walk across the little country of Belgium, and Belgium is allied with England, and which means England is going to be dragged into the war because of Belgium. And if all this sounds convoluted and confusing, it's because it is. And the United States, one of the big fears against imperialism was the United States was going to get drug into these global conflicts. And the United States, because of our ties to England, will eventually be drug into this war. But this alliance system of you can't fight anybody without fighting everybody, because Germany is also allied to Italy. Now, Italy is going to break that alliance. They're going to actually side with England because they're looking for an opportunity to take some territory away from from Austria. And so they're going to break their alliance. But Germany is still allied to the Ottoman Empire, the current country of Turkey. And gosh, I mean, it gets nuts. Bulgaria is involved, and and in fact, it's going to be really, these alliances are going to be so set that 20 years after the war, when World War II breaks out, you're actually going to see the same alliances, with one exception, and that's Japan. Japan is an ally of England, so Japan will fight on the side of England, whereas in World War II, they will fight on the side of Germany. So they're the only ones that really are any different. But it's this alliance system that's going to take what should have been or could have potentially been a small-scale conflict or even just an argument, is going to actually turn it into a global conflict that's going to be fought in Europe and Africa and Asia, even in North and South America and in the Pacific. And so it's going to make it into a true world war. So the militarism, the alliance system, but also and add into this is this imperialism. Everybody's looking for territory. You know, one of the reasons why Italy gets involved in the war is they want territory from Austria-Hungary. Russia, Germany, and England were already kind of butting heads because they had fought for territory in Africa, and so they were used to conflict. And we'd had a whole series of wars up until this time, most of which lasted about 6 weeks. And so everyone sort of assumed that this dust up in Europe was going to be over in about 6 weeks. And in fact, when people go marching off, they're completely shocked when the war is not over by Christmas. And so, but this imperialism where they're constantly jockeying for position, jockeying for land and resources, and they're constantly in conflict with one another as they go pursue new lands, particularly in Africa and in Asia, where they're carving up China. That's just contributing to this need for an alliance system. It's contributing to this militarism because all these short conflicts are really feeding into this idea that war is short and glorious and beautiful and everyone goes home a winner. And that's not going to be the case in World War I. And then the last one is just national pride, nationalism. You know, the whole thing really boils down to nationalism. Austria-Hungary felt insulted that a Serbian terrorist organization had killed their next in line to their throne. They took it as a personal affront to their national honor. It's then that nationalism and national honor are going to make, it's going to push people to join in large numbers. They're going to join whole villages. In England, for example, are going to join to go and fight for king and crown in And then once the war starts and the conflicts become really bad, that national honor is going to continue to drive the conflict, even when it becomes pretty obvious that the war has become a stalemate and a meat grinder, and they weren't getting anywhere except into coffins. And so, and I think the good example of that is you look at the last day of the war, November 11th, 1918, the Armistice Day, and the Armistice Day, and the war's going to end at 11 o'clock. It's the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. And you would think if you know the war is going to end, that you stop fighting. And yet there were thousands, tens of thousands of people killed that morning because their honor had been besmirched. And they had to make sure they killed as many of their enemies as they could before they couldn't kill them anymore. So there you go. There's our main causes of World War I. And if you have a hard time remembering militarism, alliance system, imperialism, and national pride or nationalism, think of it this way: M-A-I-N, main. So there's our main causes of World War I. All right, I may bring this to class. I hope to see you there. Until then,